hope you're having a good evening. It's come to my attention there are some things that need to be clarified. And I'm going to admit I need assistance from the good people of Texas and our allies in getting some things clarified. I did this thing in 2015. I did this thing where I contacted the city council of Taylor, Texas. I wasn't in Texas at the time, I was actually in California. But I contacted every member of the city council in Taylor, Texas, because there was a detention center facility located in Taylor, Texas. And at that time, there had been media attention brought to the fact that women in the detention center, including women who had families, were on a hunger strike. When I went through and looked at the list of people who were on the city council, they all represented themselves in a particular manner. And two of the members of the city council identified themselves as military veterans. And so when I contacted them, I made a personal appeal to them. I said, as the daughter of a career member of the United States Marine Corps, I know that you have a greater character and comportment than to permit for something of this sort to continue being perpetuated without addressing it. If there are miscommunications in what's going on, it behooves you to clarify and to make sure that things are brought to the attention of people in an accurate manner. Only one member of the city council responded. Not only that, but certain other members of the city council, their messages got bounced back. But one of the members of the city council did respond. And we had a brief correspondence. I even called him on the phone. And he did that thing I did. I did it once before. Where you answer the phone, you have a particular compartment, but as soon as you recognize who it is you're speaking to, your demeanor changes. And that's not necessarily the problem, right? The problem is, later, I was referred to a state representative. The problem was, the link to the state representative was broken. I couldn't actually contact that state representative. What happened was I got diverted to another representative. It just so happens that representative has a last name that sounds very similar to mine, but it's spelled differently. He also happens to be the representative of an area I used to live in, but had to leave because, well, those are matters that are still of consideration. And I made a personal appeal to him, myself, that representative. The one who has the name that sounds like mine but is spelled differently? He had proposed a bill. It hadn't been passed so far as I knew. But that's in connection with another bill that he had proposed. Both of them spoke very directly and relevantly to factors I had experienced during my time in Texas. He never responded. I think that now there might be some misrepresentation in which Krause is doing what from where. I am not in Fort Worth. I'm in Dallas. And I was brought to Dallas as an act of trafficking in connection with a municipal bond that was supposed to be a bond involving both Fort Worth and Dallas. And after I got to Dallas, I spent less than 60 days in Fort Worth, conveniently relocated back to Dallas right before the expiration of a time period wherein the Texas Board of Insurance Commissioners was by law required to contact me in writing and just refused. Now the problem is, the Texas Board of Insurance is in default to me, significantly in default. So was the State Office of Risk Management, significantly in default to me. And I'm concerned that somebody that represents themselves as an alleged elected member of the Texas House of Representatives has somehow been misrepresented and or is misrepresenting factors associated with me. See, when I was in Chicago during the 2008 presidential and congressional elections, this happened all the time. Somebody had a name. It sounded kind of like somebody in public office. Or somebody that might even be suspected of criminal activity. There might be a letter here, maybe two letters, that are slightly different, but the name sounds similar enough. All the time, people were getting picked up. You got the wrong person. But once they get entered into the system, and once the process starts, well, how long are they going to stick around? Especially if they don't know about requirements on sureties in order to guard against default, right? So I just want this to be settled tonight. Last time there was a refusal to clarify the identity and refusal to actually acknowledge that a report on identity theft had been filed in enough time. It resulted in a family member of mine being executed as part of somebody else's illegal lien upon my family. Now, the history of America is replete with circumstances like this. It's one of the reasons we still characterize Thomas Jefferson primarily as a slave owner, right? Let's be honest. My family never owned slaves. I've spent my entire life repudiating anybody that would make a justification for owning slaves. But I'm in a situation where somebody wants to make an example out of reparations and slavery. You've done a good job so far, but I would appreciate it if you get the name on the bonds correct this evening. Make all of the corrections and clarifications you need. As I have said, I was trafficked here for a $300 million bond that was shared with Fort Worth. In whose interest was it to allow this to be maintained for going on 3 years? In 39 days, it'll be exactly 3 years. After 3 years, that means that is 3 years of refusal to acknowledge a claim of fraud involving a $300 million bond that itself was used to leverage other municipal bonds just for Dallas and Fort Worth. The problem is somebody intentionally orchestrated it that way and also intentionally orchestrated a bond that happened to be released on the anniversary of a Chase Bank seizure of accounts associated with people from Palestine as alleged reparations for their role in supporting Japan during World War II. And now we have all these young men right here in Dallas also being trafficked. Who thought that they would hold their bond? I just need to know this ASAP. Every single one of those young men being housed on site here in Dallas is being trafficked as part of a war crimes racket. Literally, that's exactly what it is. And if you had people in the nation of Honduras or any other country that co-conspired and or in some stead allowed for you to make them your personal asset, you are not allowed to do that, and you are not going to get away with it one way or another. It behooves everybody to clarify these matters tonight. I've already made very, very obvious what needs to be clarified. If you're concerned that there are accounts right now that reflect that I have one position and there are accounts that reflect that I have another position, I could understand if there's some potential confusion, but at the same time, there's not. It's absolutely evident and apparent. You put me on 2 concurrent illegal timelines around obligations associated with intent to defraud the federal government via capital outlay programs in 1995 and 1996 based on 93. And you know it. There's no miscommunication here. I'm honoring both obligations. You aren't.